Buckle up, folks, because we're diving deep today. Deep into the worlds of Jonathan Swift and Lawrence Sterne,
Oh, yeah, those literary
the
heavyweights.
minds behind Gulliver's Travels.
Yeah.
And,
Tristram Shandy.
right, we're sifting through excerpts, biographies, even some scholarly opinions.
Trying to get a handle on these guys.
Yeah, like with Swift, was he just spinning a fantastical yarn? Or was there a deeper critique of society hidden in there?
And Stern, genius. Or just rambling on and on.
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is, and it's what makes them so interesting, right? You have people praising them as masters of satire.
But then others are left scratching their heads.
Totally.
Let's start with Swift. His life, I mean, talk about complicated.
Yeah.
This love-hate thing with Ireland. Couldn't stand the people.
Right.
But fiercely opposed to English rule over them.
A real paradox. He even called himself, get this, an Englishman dropped in Ireland.
Wow.
And his personal life, just as dramatic. The relationships with Vanessa and Stella.
What about them?
Both died under mysterious circumstances.
No kidding.
Adds another layer to this already complex figure, doesn't it?
Like something out of Shakespeare. And then there's that story about him giving super specific instructions on editing his travelogue.
Oh, yeah.
Like he knew people would debate its meaning forever.
Which brings us to Gulliver's Travels, right?
Yeah.
Is it just a fun adventure? Or a cleverly disguised social commentary?
Yeah. What's the deal with those Lilliputians? Cracking eggs.
I know. Their little wars over which end to crack first.
It's almost like Swift's making fun of political fights in his own time.
Exactly. And centuries later, it still resonates, right? Our own political squabbles.
It's like we're still arguing about which end of the egg to crack.
Right. And then you have the Laputans, obsessed with science, but so impractical.
Needing a slap to get back to reality. Literally.
Oh, I remember that part.
And their king. Suppressing rebellions by hovering his floating island.
Heavy-handed. Much.
Subtlety wasn't his forte. But for me, Swift's harshest take on humanity, it's got to be the Yahoos.
Brutal creatures.
The flaws, the vices.
He saw all of it in humanity.
And then the king of the Whittams calls humans the most pernicious race of little odious vermin. Ouch.
Strong words. Makes you think about just how pessimistic Swift was about human nature, doesn't it?
It does. So is Gulliver's Travels all fun and games? Or a sharp critique?
It's a question that's kept scholars busy for centuries.
A lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Now let's turn to Lawrence Sterne. Arguably even more divisive than Swift.
Oh, absolutely. Sterne was all about breaking the rules. Tristram Shandy. Forget the mold. It's a whirlwind of digressions, wordplay.
Organized chaos.
You could say that, but Sterne himself described his writing as incredibly intense, like tearing himself apart to evoke emotions in his readers.
Wow. Committed to his craft. And you can feel that in his comedic timing, like when Tristram's dad gets interrupted by the clock winding.
Oh, that scene.
His reaction is so over the top. Hilarious.
It's the absurdity. Sterne was a master of it. And Uncle Toby. Forever obsessed with those military fortifications.
Miniature battles in his backyard.
Using something silly to comment on the grandiosity of war, maybe?
It makes you see things in a whole new light, that's for
Yeah.
sure. But through it all, you have Tristram's journey of self-discovery.
Right.
And we're talking from the moment of his conception.
Starting at the very beginning.
And these seemingly small events, like remember the accidental circumcision?
With the window sash. Classic.
Sterne shows how those little things shape who we become.
Exactly. So is Tristram Shandy genius? Or just, well, nonsense?
The debate rages on.
That's what's so great about literature, though, right? You get these debates, these personal connections with the book. It's not about finding the one right answer, you know?
It's more about like a conversation with the author.
Yeah. And with yourself, too. Speaking of conversation, there's this part in Tristram Shandy that always gets people talking.
Oh, yeah. Which one?
It's about how your name can, like, influence your character. Sterne writes, I repeat it over again. He was serious. And in consequence of it, he would lose all temper and decorum in this point, and would say strange and extravagant things in his heat of argument, which were so entirely out of all compass of thinking.
Makes you wonder how much of who we are is just, well, decided for us. Things we don't get to choose.
Right. Our names, when we're born, our family, it's all stuff we inherit.
Sterne seems to say those things have a huge impact, even if they seem random.
Absolutely. He takes it to an extreme, sure, but it does make you think, could our names really shape our personalities, even our lives?
It's a wild thought, isn't it?
It is. And it's not just names, right? It's everything. All the stuff that makes up our background.
Sterne saying those outside forces matter way more than we admit.
Yeah. And that connects to a big theme in Tristram Shandy, chance,
Well,
contingency.
like Tristram's life, always getting thrown off course by something unexpected.
Exactly. Big things, small things. It's like Stern saying we're not actually in control as much as we think.
Life's full of surprises, he's saying.
That's it. So, back to our main question. Genius or rambling? If you like your plots neat and tidy, your characters clear-cut.
Stern might not be your guy.
Probably not. But if you're up for something different, an experiment, a wild, hilarious look at what it means to be human.
Then you might just love Stern. You might just see his genius.
You might. Now, switching gears to Gulliver's Travels for a sec, there's a part where Swift talks about education and morals, about the Hoems and how they teach. He writes, they thought the want of moral virtues was so far from being supplied by superior endowments of the mind that employments could never be put into such dangerous hands as those of persons so qualified.
He's saying being smart isn't enough, right?
Yeah.
You need virtue, too.
Yeah. Intelligence without morality. It's not just useless, it's dangerous.
Feels pretty relevant today, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? We're so focused on achievement, on being the best, the smartest.
We forget about character, about integrity.
It's like Swift's reminding us. True progress, it takes both. Brains and heart.
And the way he uses satire to show that, it's brilliant. The Wyndhams, all reason and compassion,
And in the Yahoos,
driven by their baser instincts.
it's like, who are we more like?
Exactly. Makes you think about your own values, doesn't it?
It does, and that's what makes Swift and Stern, too, so fascinating. They make you think about yourself, about society.
About how we tell stories.
Right. They remind us. Literature isn't just for fun. It's a way to understand the world, our place in it.
Okay, let's jump back to Tristram Shandy for a bit. There's this one passage that really shows Stern's playfulness with language. Listen to this. Writing, when properly managed, as you may be sure I think mine is but a different name for conversation, as no one who knows what he's about in good company would venture to talk all. So no author who understands the just boundaries of decorum and good breeding would presume to think all.
Oh, I love that one. It's so conversational, so Stern, like he's breaking that fourth wall.
Chatting with us directly.
Exactly, like he's invited us over for tea and a good chat.
Yeah.
So informal, you know?
Yeah.
Lets his personality come through.
And he's not afraid to laugh at himself either. Remember how he describes his own writing? Pell-mell, helter-skelter, ding-dong, cut and thrust, backstroke and four-strokes, sideway and long way.
It's self-aware, but in a fun way. Like he knows it's a bit chaotic, but he's okay with that. Inviting us along for the ride.
That's a big difference between Swift and Stern, don't you think?
Huh?
Swift, he's all about exposing the bad stuff, the flaws, the follies.
He wants us to see ourselves, the good and the bad.
But Stern, he's gentler, more whimsical.
Like he's celebrating those quirks, those weird little things that make us human.
So if you need a clear plot, a moral of the story, Tristram Shandy might not be for you.
But if you're open to something different, an experiment, then Stern might just be your new favorite.
He might. Okay, back to Gulliver's Travels for a minute. There's this part where Swift talks about politics, about government. He says, and he gave it for his opinion, that whoever could make 2 ears of corn or 2 blades of grass to grow upon a spot of ground where only one grew before would deserve better of mankind and do more essential service to his country than the whole race of politicians put together.
Oof. Sounds like he's not a fan of politicians.
Yeah, he's saying they're more worried about power than helping people.
He's all about practical solutions, real progress, not just talk and empty promises.
It's so relevant, isn't it? Even today, politicians arguing about nothing while real problems get ignored.
It's sad, but true. But Swift's not just criticizing, he's making a bigger point about innovation, about making things better.
He's saying those people, the ones who actually make a difference, they're the real heroes.
The ones who solve problems, who create, who help others, they deserve the credit, not just the politicians.
I wonder what Swift would say about our world today with our obsession with celebrities and political drama.
I don't think he'd be impressed. Okay, one more trip back to Tristram Shandy, if you're up for it. There's a part where Stern really shows his understanding of pacing, of how to keep a story interesting. He says, I would not give a groat for that man's knowledge in pencraft who does not understand this, that the best plain narrative in the world, tacked very close to the last spirited apostrophe to my Uncle Toby, would have felt both cold and vapid upon the reader's palate.
That's a mouthful. What's he saying, basically? that even a good story can get boring if it's all the same.
That's it. You need variety. Humor, emotion, different tones. You got to keep the reader engaged.
Keep them guessing.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to shake things up. And that's Stern in a nutshell, isn't it? Always jumping around, keeping us on our toes.
Like he's conducting an orchestra. Different instruments, different melodies, all coming together.
I love that. It's so true. His writing has that musicality, rhythm, flow. It's pleasing to the ear, but also makes you think.
Like he's composing music with words.
He is. And then there's the wordplay, the puns. He loves to twist language around, make it fun and surprising.
So, bottom line, if you like things predictable, Tristram Shandy might not be for you. But if you're looking for an adventure, for something that'll make you laugh and think,
Stern might just blow you away. He's a true original.
he is. Well, that wraps up part 2 of our deep dive into Swift and Sterne. It's been quite a journey with Swift and Sterne, from the sharp satire of Gulliver's Travels to the, well, unique brilliance of Tristram Shandy.
They really are something else, aren't they?
You mentioned earlier how Sterne's like a composer, building a symphony with language.
Yeah, that musicality in his work, it's not just about telling a story, it's creating an experience for the reader.
Exactly. Like in Tristram Shandy, there's this part where he talks about the limits of language. He says, "This is the best account I am determined to give of the slow progress my father made in his Tristropedia," at which, as I said, he was 3 years and something more, indefatigably at work and, at last, had scarce completed, by his own reckoning, 1/2 of his undertaking.
It's like he's admitting even he can't fully capture life in words.
It's true, isn't it? We try to make sense of everything, to tell our stories in a way that makes sense.
But life's just messy, isn't it? It doesn't always fit neatly into words.
And Sterne seems to get that. He embraces the chaos.
Oh, absolutely. He's not trying to force things into a box. And that brings us back to chance, to contingency.
Like, we think we're in control, but then life throws a curveball.
Exactly. And those random events, those little twists of fate, they're what make life interesting.
It's like Sterne saying, don't try to explain everything. Just enjoy the ride.
Yeah. And find the humor in it all. Like that scene with Tristram's dad, trying to plan every detail of his son's life.
And then, of course, everything goes wrong. Hilarious.
It's a reminder, right? No matter how hard we try, some things are just out of our control.
And maybe that's okay. Makes life a bit more exciting, don't you think?
I think so. So as we wrap up our dip dive, let me ask you something. Whose view of humanity resonates with you more? Swift, with his biting satire.
Or Sterne, with his gentler humor. Who are we closer to, in your opinion?
Of course it's not black and white. We're probably somewhere in between. A mix of darkness and light. Reason and emotion.
And that's the beauty of literature, right? Exploring these different ideas, wrestling with the big questions.
Exactly. So as you keep reading Swift and Sterne, ask yourself, what speaks to you? What makes you laugh? What makes you think?
What do they teach you about yourself? About the world?
We hope this deep dive has sparked something in you. A new appreciation for these two literary masters.
And until next time, happy reading.